الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك وعظيم سلطانك. اللهم أحينا مسلمين وتوفنا مسلمين وألحقنا بالصالحين. O Allah, make us live as Muslims, make us die as Muslims, and make us in the company of those who are righteous. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وصفيه وخليله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت وسلمت وباركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين. Dear Muslims, the subject of this khutbah is responsibility. There's a very famous hadith that so many of us have heard so many times from our childhood until now, and maybe inshallah in the future. And today inshallah we'll reflect on this hadith and its importance. And the hadith is in Bukhari and Muslim, in which the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is telling us, كلكم راع وكلكم مسؤول عن رعيته. Every one of you is like a shepherd, and every one of you is responsible for his sphere of control and authority. Every one of you is like a shepherd, is responsible. And every one of you is responsible for his sphere of control and authority. And the Messenger of Allah ﷺ expands. Al-Imam Ra' wa mas'ulun an ra'yatih. The Imam, the leader, is responsible for the people under his control, under his authority. وَالرَّجُلُ رَاعٍ فِي أَهْلِهِ وَمَسْئُولٌ عَنْ رَعِيَّتِهِ. And the man, the husband, is responsible for his sphere of control and authority. وَالْمَرْأَةُ رَاعِيَةٌ فِي بَيْتِ زَوْجِهَا وَمَسْئُولَةٌ عَنْ رَعِيَّتِهَا. And also the woman, the husband, the wife, is responsible for her sphere of influence, control, and authority, and she'll be asked about that. وَالْخَادِمُ رَاعٍ في مال سيده ومسؤول عن رعيته. Even the servant, who he thinks he's working for someone and he just have to do his job, is also responsible for the wealth of his master, for the one who's employing him. والرجل راع في مال أبيه ومسؤول عن رعيته. And even the young man is responsible for the wealth of his parents, and he'll be asked about this responsibility. And then the Messenger of Allah ﷺ concludes the hadith by emphasizing the meaning again. وَكُلُّكُمْ رَاعٍ وَمَسْئُولٌ عَنْ رَعِيَّتِهِ. And every one of you is responsible for his sphere of control and authority, and he will be asked about this responsibility. Responsibility is to do the work assigned to us and be sincere in doing it, regardless of the results. Some of us shy away from fulfilling the responsibility because we're afraid of what will happen. And to give an example, if you find someone drowning, it is our responsibility to do our best to save him or her. Maybe by the time we do that, they'll be dead. But it is our responsibility to do our best to save that person. And if you find a person oppressed, it is our responsibility to remove that oppression and to help that person, regardless of the outcome. And that's an important distinction. The responsibility that Allah Almighty is asking us about, will be asking us about on the Day of Judgment, is to do our best regardless of the outcome. In the Quran, there are numerous verses that talks about this responsibility. Allah Almighty is saying in the Quran, هذا كتابنا ينطق عليكم بالحق إنا كنا نستنسخ ما كنتم تعملون. This is our book, will speak against us with the truth. And Allah Almighty is reminding us, we are recording everything you have done. And it says in the Quran, أَفْحَسِبْتُمْ أَنَّمَا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ عَبَثًا وَأَنَّكُمْ إِلَيْنَا لَا تُرْجَعُونَ. Do you think we created you in vain? And you will not come back to us? We will come back to Allah Almighty, and Allah Almighty will ask us about this responsibility that He has given us. And He says in the Quran, لا يسأل عما يفعل وهم يسألون. Allah Almighty is not questioned for whatever He does. No one questions Allah Almighty for His actions, for His decisions, for His will, for His divine destiny. And وهم يسألون, and will be asked about our actions, our responsibilities. Responsibilities is three kinds. There is religious responsibilities, and for you and me to fulfill whatever Allah Almighty and His Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam asks us to do. And the source of this religious responsibility is Islam. The second kind is the social responsibility. And that is for you and me to abide by the laws and the norms of the community and the society we live in. And this has three things. Three factors for this social responsibility. One is caring. If I do not care about the community, the society I live in, then there's no responsibility. It is important for you and me to care about the society, the community, the neighborhood we live in. Second is to understand. What does this caring mean? It is one thing to care about something, it's another to understand what does this caring entails. And third, and most importantly, is participation. The social responsibilities requires us to participate. Many times you hear an announcement in the masjid or on the radio, you read a newspaper ad about something, a social responsibilities. To feed the hungry, to help with something. And our responsibility is to participate to the best of our ability. Not to just listen and read and say somebody else will do it. No. We should not assume that someone else will do the responsibility. It is our duty to participate and be part of the community. The third kind of responsibility is the behavior responsibility. And the source of that is the conscience. It is our conscience that enables us to participate and understand. And if you read the Quran, Allah Almighty uses the conscience, this behavior responsibility, to tell us about our religious responsibilities. And listen to this beautiful verse in the Quran. وَاذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ وَمِيثَاقَهُ الَّذِي وَاثَقَكُمْ بِهِ إِذْ قُلْتُمْ سَمِعْنَا وَأَطَعْنَا. Allah Almighty is reminding us about His ni'mah and our religious responsibility. And how does He do that? By invoking the behavior responsibility. إِذْ قُلْتُمْ سَمِعْنَا وَأَطَعْنَا. He's reminding us about the covenant that we have made with Allah Almighty when we became Muslims. Allah Almighty is invoking the behavior, our conscience, to do our religious duties. This responsibility encompasses everything. For the individual, Allah Almighty is saying, فَوَرَبِّكَ لَنَسْأَلَنَّهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ. Allah Almighty is swearing that each one of us, whether you speak Arabic or not, will be asked about this responsibility. When it comes to the actions and deeds, فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَهُ وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ شَرًّا يَرَهُ. Any atom's weight worth of good or bad, Allah Almighty will ask us about. When it comes to the sayings, مَا يَلْفُظُ مِنْ قَوْلٍ إِلَّا لَدَيْهِ رَقِيبٌ عَتِيدٌ. Anything that we say, we utter, it is being recorded for us or against us. When it comes to the hearing and seeing, إِنَّ السَّمْعَ وَالْبَصَرَ وَالْفُؤَادَ كُلُّ أُولَٰئِكَ كَانَ عَنْهُ مَسْئُولًا. Whatever we see with our eyes, we hear with our ears, even the thinking that comes to our minds and our hearts will be asked about. When it comes to any blessings from Allah Almighty, however little it is or however abundant it is, Allah Almighty says, ثُمَّ لَتُسْأَلُنَّ يَوْمَئِذٍ عَنِ النَّعِيمِ. You will be asked on that day, on the day of judgment, about the na'im. And the na'im is any little things. So this responsibility encompasses everything. Our actions, our sayings, any blessing Allah Almighty has given us individually and collectively. This responsibility is also personal. I cannot blame my action and my behavior on someone else. I had no choice, well, I had to do this. This responsibility is personal. قُلْ لَا تُسْأَلُونَ عَمَّا أَجْرَمْنَا وَلَا نُسْأَلُ عَمَّا تَعْمَلُونَ. Say, we will not ask about what you have done wrong, and you will not be asked about what we have done. So each one of us will be asked about his or her responsibility individually. At the same time, Allah Almighty will reward us if we fulfill our responsibilities right. And Allah Almighty also will hold us accountable if we do not hold this responsibility and fulfill its rights. مَنْ جَاءَ بِالْحَسَنَةِ فَلَهُ عَشْرُ أَمْثَالِهَا. Whoever does a good deed will get tenfold. وَمَنْ جَاءَ بِالسَّيِّئَةِ فَلَا يُجْزَى إِلَّا مِثْلَهَا. And if we happen to fail in this responsibility and do a bad deed, it will be only counted as one bad deed. So why should we care about fulfilling our responsibilities in this life? It's because we'll be asked about it. If we do right, Allah Almighty will reward us 10 times and even more. And if we do wrong, Allah Almighty will count as only one bad deed. One way to go through this responsibility and do it right is to start with ourselves. محاسبة النفس. Before we even do any actions. Some of us, they plan by saying, I will take this freeway on this day, or I'll take the surface street, or I will buy this much because I only have this much money. We plan for our daily affairs. We should also plan for our religious affairs before doing the action or the deed. First, we ask ourselves, is this doable or not? If it is doable, is doing it better or leaving it better? And if leaving the action is better, we leave it. If doing it is better, then we ask ourselves a third question. Am I doing this for the sake of Allah Almighty or not? And if I'm not doing it for the sake of Allah Almighty, then it is better to leave it. And if I'm doing it for the sake of Allah Almighty, I ask myself a fourth question. Is there anyone who can help me do this? And if there's someone who can help me do it, I will ask this brother and sister to help me do it. So we ask ourselves 4 questions. Can I do this or not? If I can do it, is it good to do it or is it good not to do it? If it is good to do it, am I doing it for the sake of Allah Almighty or not? If I'm doing it for the sake of Allah Almighty, then is there any brother or sister who can help me? because the more the company, the better it is for me to do the good deed. I conclude with the bigger responsibility, the responsibility of the ummah, the nation. When a ruler, an emir, a president is elected for that position, he or she has a responsibility for the people under him. And it is no coincidence that Ali radiallahu anhu is telling Malik ibn al-Ashtar before he appoints him to be the ruler of Egypt about the responsibility of being a ruler, and it just happened to be Egypt. He tells Malik, and whatever he tells Malik as a ruler for a country applies to all of us as husbands, wives, parents, children. He tells Malik, know very well Malik, I have appointed you to a city قامت فيها قبلك دول بالجور والعدل. This country I'm appointing you to be the leader for, there were also people before you ruling it with justice and injustice. وإن الناس سينظرون في أمرك في مثل ما كنت تنظر إليه من أمور الولاة قبلك. And know very well, Malik, that people look at you and will evaluate you the same way you used to evaluate the rulers before you. Sometimes when we're in a position, we say, if I were him, I would have done this and this and this. And we keep criticizing. But when we are put in the same position, our behavior will change. Like they say, because you're not in the same situation, that's why you're saying this. So Ali radiallahu anhu is saying, watch your action. Because people will judge you the same way you were judging them before you were put in that position. And then he gives them the heart of the matter, how to be a good ruler, a good responsible person. فليكن أحب الذخائر إليك ذخيرة العمل الصالح. The best investment you can have, the best training and qualification you can have for this position to be responsible is the righteousness. واشعر قلبك الرحمة بالرعية والمحبة لهم واللطف بهم. And put in your heart the mercy for the people you're responsible for, and the love for them, and the kindness. Think about this. When we are responsible, be it a businessman, a father, a mother, to have the love for the people we're responsible for, to have the kindness for them, to have the mercy for them. And then he reminds Malik about a very important thing. That when it comes to responsibility, there is no difference between a Muslim and a non-Muslim. I cannot be just merciful and loving to a Muslim and another non-Muslim. It's a different situation. He reminds Malik, فإنهم صنفان إما أخوك في الإسلام وإما نظيرك في الخلق. People are two kinds. Either he is your brother in Islam, or he is your counterpart in the creation. And look, he does not use the word Muslim or non-Muslims or kafir. He says he's your brother in Islam, or نظيرك في الخلق, your equivalent in the creation of Allah Almighty. And then he reminds Malik that they're not angels, that they'll make mistakes. يفرط منهم الذلل وتغلب عليهم العلل ويؤتى على أيديهم من العمد والخطأ. They're human beings. They'll make mistakes. They will get unhealthy. And they will also do mistakes intentionally and unintentionally. So as a responsible, in whatever position we're in, expect that the people we're responsible for will make mistakes, intentionally and unintentionally. And this should not stop our love, our kindness to them. And he says to Malik, فأعطهم من عفوك وصفحك مثل ما تحب أن يعطيك الله من عفوه وصفحه. Very beautiful advice. He says, even though they will make mistakes intentionally, unintentionally, give them from your forgiveness and passing over their faults as much as you want Allah to forgive you and pass over your faults. He's tying the forgiveness of Allah Almighty to our forgiveness for the people who are responsible for. If you want Allah to forgive you, forgive them as much as you want Allah to forgive you. Then he's reminding him that even though you're responsible, you're the father, the mother, the wife, the president, the manager, he's reminding him, فَإِنَّكَ فَوْقَهُمْ وَوَلِيُّ الْأَمْرُ فَوْقُكَ وَاللَّهُ فَوْقَ مَنْ وَلَّاكَ. You are responsible for them, you're above them, yes. And there's someone who's above you. And there's someone who's above all of you, which is Allah Almighty. A beautiful advice from Ali ibn Abi Talib to Malik ibn Ashtar about the responsibility and how to deal with the people that he's responsible for. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم وأدعو الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي لا غيره ولا رب سواه وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Very seldom we see in a hadith the Messenger of Allah ﷺ is repeating the same thing in the beginning and the end of the hadith. In that hadith he says صلى الله عليه وسلم كلكم راع وكلكم مسؤول عن رعيته. Every one of you is responsible, and he is responsible for the people under his influence, control, or authority, and will be asked about this responsibility. And in the end of the hadith, he repeats the very same sentence, that all of us are responsible and will be asked about this responsibility. And Allah Almighty is reminding us that he is not asked about what he does, but will be asked about what we do. لا يسأل عما يفعل وهم يسألون. And this responsibility is a religious responsibility, a social responsibility, and a behavior responsibility. We need to understand, participate in the actions, the affairs of the community, not to stay aside. And this responsibility encompasses everything. Our saying, our actions, what we hear, what we see, what we do, and it is personal. I cannot blame my actions, my behavior on someone else. And to do good in the responsibility, we need to be kind, loving, and merciful for the people we're responsible for. And we need to remind ourselves that they'll make mistakes intentionally and unintentionally. And we need to forgive them as much as we want Allah Almighty to forgive us. Umar radiallahu anhu is reminding us how to take this responsibility seriously. حاسبوا أنفسكم قبل أن تحاسبوا وزنوا أنفسكم قبل أن توزنوا. Hold yourself accountable before you are held accountable before Allah Almighty. And weigh your deeds in this life before it is weighed for you in the hereafter. فإنه أهون عليكم في الحساب غدا أن تحاسبوا أنفسكم اليوم. It is much easier for you on the day of judgment to hold yourself accountable and audit your actions and deeds in this life. وتزينوا للعرض الأكبر. And beautify yourself in your actions and behavior and deeds for the day of judgment. يومئذ تعرضون لا تخفى منكم خافية. Then he recites a verse in Surah Al-Haqqa. Today you'll be presented, you'll be brought forward before Allah Almighty, and nothing will be hidden from Allah Almighty. We ask Allah Almighty to make us among those who are responsible for everything and everyone under our influence, authority, and control. And we ask Allah Almighty to make us among those who hold themselves accountable before they're held accountable, And we ask Allah Almighty to make us among those who forgive, love, and have mercy on the people who are responsible for. اللهم اجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما ولا تجعل فينا ولا بيننا ولا منا شقيا ولا محروما. اللهم آت نفوسنا تقواها وزكها أنت خير من زكاها أنت وليها ومولاها. اللهم انصر الإسلام وعز المسلمين وأعلي بفضلك كلمتي الحق والدين. اللهم هذا الدعاء ومنك الإجابة. اللهم هذا الجهد وعليك التكلان ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. وأقم الصلاة.